Now, first, I want to bring in John Spencer, all right, one of the foremost experts on urban warfare, recently returned from Gaza, so he's got fresh eyes, okay? It's good to see you, brother. Also, Arwa Damon, my friend, former senior international correspondent for CNN, founder of INARA, INARA. If you want to help, okay, do some more walk for your talk and go donate to INARA like we did here with the money for the free agent gear that I'm selling, which is why I'm selling it, okay? She has also been there recently. So thank you both. Arwa, thank you especially for being up in the middle of the night where you are. Now, what do you make of the Biden determination that Rafah is okay, and what do you believe are the stakes on the ground?
Well, first of all, Rafah is far from okay because you have tens of thousands of people that have had to move. You have this sheer and total panic that has spread everywhere. And you also have the reality that in, the taking of the Rafah border crossing with Egypt by the IDF, no humanitarian aid entering and has not, in fact, entered in the last 48 hours. And the fallout from that is going to be absolutely catastrophic. Add to that, Chris, the areas that people are being told to go to, one of them is basically a neighborhood that is a little more than rubble right now. And the other is this area that is effectively beachfront. So lots of sand dunes, absolutely no infrastructure, already packed with tents. And it's causing this like emotional roller coaster where I was talking to a friend of mine in Rafah actually who had to evacuate. And she was basically comparing it to having, other people playing emotional ping pong with herself and all other civilians right now caught in all of this.
Arwa, a quick bounce question, then I want to get to John's take on what America's doing here and how much can it do. I keep complaining that a material mistake that the IDF, that Israel is making, is not letting people like you, not in an aid worker capacity, but as a journalist, on the ground. They say it's too dangerous, but that's what I watched you for years. Go to dangerous situations, more dangerous even than this. Do you believe that this is a major mistake by Israel? If so, what do you think should be done about it, and by whom?
Well, I mean, first of all, absolutely. Does Gaza need more journalists? Does it need eyes on the ground from every single outlet that exists there? Absolutely, 100%. But the danger excuse is always conveniently used by the Israelis and by other countries when they basically want to keep journalists from seeing what is actually transpiring on the ground. There has to be a much bigger push by networks, but also by governments to basically try to convince the Israelis to allow access to Gaza. But given that, a country like the US can't even get Israel to dial back on its offensive, it's not going to be likely that they're going to be able to convince Israel to allow, the press inside to cover what is actually happening. Because, Chris, you cannot go into Gaza and have the same understanding of what's happening, even if you're following minute by minute from the outside. Being in there, it just enhances your understanding to an entirely different level.
Yeah, that has to be true. And I think that Israel, John, to bring you into the conversation, and again, thanks, brother. It's good to have you here, and I want your perspective based on what you saw on the ground there. I think they're hurting themselves because there's so much propagandizing of material that does come out of Gaza that, I don't know how this is any worse than what it would be if you had people just showing what the reality is. What was your take on the ground? And let's start the conversation.
So, Chris, my take on the ground in Khan Yunis was the extreme difficulty that the IDF has faced against Hamas, using everything it can, to include, as recent as yesterday, attacking humanitarian ports and entryways, doing anything it can to push the narratives. But what I saw was an IDF fighting for not just for destroying the enemy, but for protecting civilians. And I saw it in ways that I didn't even think were possible in this kind of urban combat.
Do you think that the Israelis are conducting themselves the way America would in the same situation?
So that's a tricky question. Actually, the steps that Israel has taken to prevent civilians, I honestly believe and have shown through research, is more than the United States has ever taken in any battle, and especially in any war, I think the United States would have ended this already, my personal opinion. And this is where, like you say, Rafa going in hot and heavy, that's actually not what they've done. And they are actually have had to go slower. They went from 4 divisions down to 1 brigade in all of Gaza, as the United States has put pressure on them to do it a different way. And that means slower. That means that the humanitarian issues that are in Gaza, which I believe are there, are being prolonged because Hamas is still in power and still has 132 hostages. So the quicker you get this done, the better for everybody.
What do you make of that, Arwa?
Well, I think first of all, it's quite different to compare, someone's lived experience on the ground in Gaza with that of someone who is being escorted by the IDF. It's not necessarily a, independent picture of what's happening. Add to that, I've been on plenty US military operations myself, and I've seen how the US military carries out targeting of individuals that are on its wanted lists, and it most certainly does not wait for those individuals to enter into a crowded civilian area before launching a strike on them. Add to all of that, this has mostly been a battle that has been carried out through airstrikes and less so on the ground. And so going in with less military force on the ground, sure, is one thing, but the issue is in the airstrikes. The other big issue also is that you have the sheer absurdity of telling civilians to evacuate to areas where there is absolutely no infrastructure to be able to receive them. There's no proper shelter, there's no proper sanitation, and there's absolutely no medical infrastructure. And to do that before, those things can be set up is just an unnecessary level of amplification of a population's pain.
John, your response to that?
Well, my response on the first part is maybe I'm not taking my analysis based on my walking around with the IDF, but maybe I'm taking it from 25 years in the U.S. Army to include 2 combat tours and urban terrain in Iraq. So when I say that Israel has taken more steps than any nation of the world in preventing casualties, I mean it through both research and from experiences, from targeting to evacuating cities. And if you're saying that you shouldn't evacuate cities, you should leave them there, then that's putting civilians in harm's way. And there's no shortage of footage coming out of Gaza. Yes, if you had independent journalists with free reign of access, but then you're damned if you do and damned if you don't, as Israel gets blamed for the death of journalists who are in harm's way.
Yeah, but look, everybody faces that. That's why you guys came up with the embed program, which was such an effective thing. I think that worked better for the military than it did for the media, but that's neither here nor there. That was the compromise to get the access. The access matters, especially as every day propaganda is overwhelming proper perspective in this situation. We see it here on campus. We see it everywhere. All right, guys, thank you very much, John.